Have you ever realized that every person around you, even the ones closest to you, is constantly performing? Their smiles, their kindness, the words, "I'm fine," all of it can be a mask, hiding a completely different side that almost no one ever sees. It was this hidden side of human nature that inspired Robert Greene to write The Laws of Human Nature, a book that teaches us how to recognize the invisible patterns that shape people's behavior, so we can better understand ourselves, see others more clearly, and avoid being manipulated. Today's chapter is one of the most important lessons in the entire book because it reveals how to read a person's true emotions, even when they're carefully hidden behind a convincing mask. There was once a man who, after becoming paralyzed at the age of 17, spent years confined to his bed. During that time, he developed an extraordinary ability to observe and understand people, eventually becoming one of the most influential figures in the history of psychology. Watch until the very end, and you'll discover why this single law has the power to completely change the way you see and understand people. Let's begin. There is a moment in every human life when we first understand a terrible and liberating truth, that the face people show the world is not the same as what lies beneath it. A child learns to smile at a relative they secretly dislike. An employee learns to nod at a boss whose ideas they privately think are foolish. We call this politeness. We call it manners. But Robert Greene, in his fourth law of human nature, calls it something else entirely: role-playing. And he argues that once you understand this one law, you will never look at another human being the same way again. From the moment we are born, we are taught to perform. We learn that raw, unfiltered emotion is dangerous, that if we cry too loudly, or show anger too openly, or reveal desire too nakedly, we will be punished, mocked, or rejected. So we build a mask. We rehearse a version of ourselves that is acceptable to others. By the time we reach adulthood, this mask has become so natural, so seamless, that we often forget it is a mask at all. We believe the character we perform for the world actually is us. But underneath that performance, something else is always running, a current of true feeling, true intention, true fear and desire, that occasionally slips through the cracks, a hesitation before answering a question, a flicker of irritation quickly suppressed, a voice that rises half a tone too high when someone claims not to be nervous. Greene's argument is simple but profound. If you can learn to see past the performance, you gain access to a form of knowledge that most people never acquire: the ability to read what a person actually feels, not merely what they say. To understand how powerful this skill can become, Greene turns to one of the strangest and most remarkable case studies in the history of psychology, a boy named Milton Erickson. In the summer of 1919, Erickson was 17 years old, living on a farm in rural Wisconsin when he was struck by polio. Within days, he was almost completely paralyzed. He could not move his limbs. He could not speak above a whisper. Doctors told his mother quietly that he would likely die before morning. He did not die, but he was left in a body that no longer obeyed him, in a house full of people who assumed, because he could not respond, that he could no longer understand them either. For a boy who had been active and athletic, this should have been a tragedy of pure loss. Instead, it became the strangest kind of education. Trapped in his own body, unable to speak or move, Erickson had nothing left to do but watch. And so he watched, and his sisters, his parents, the neighbors who came to visit, with an intensity that most people never direct at another human being. Because most people are too busy performing their own role to notice anyone else's. He began to notice things that had always been invisible to him before. He noticed that when his sisters said the word yes, it did not always mean the same thing. Sometimes it was said with the shoulders relaxed and the eyes soft. A true yes. Other times the word yes came out of a tightened jaw, a stiffened spine, eyes that refused to meet another's, a yes that was, in truth, a suppressed no. He noticed that people often communicated through the timing of their words as much as the words themselves. A slight pause before agreeing that revealed hidden doubt, an answer that came too quickly and too smoothly to be entirely honest. Confined to his bed, Erickson began to practice a kind of relentless observation. He would guess silently what a visitor was about to say, based purely on their posture and breathing, and then check himself against what they actually said. Over months, then years, this practice sharpened into something like a superpower. He was reading the layer of communication that exists beneath language, the layer most of us are trained, from childhood, to ignore. Slowly, painstakingly, Erickson also began to use what he had learned to influence his own recovery. He noticed that when he mentally rehearsed a movement, pictured his hand gripping something, imagined the muscles firing, something in his body responded, even if only faintly. He began to talk to his own paralyzed limbs the way he might talk to a stubborn, frightened patient, coaxing rather than commanding. Piece by piece, using a combination of sheer will and this newly discovered sensitivity to the subtle signals of mind and body, he taught himself to walk again. Erickson would go on to become one of the most influential psychotherapists of the 20th century, a pioneer of hypnotherapy whose techniques are still studied today. But the true source of his genius was not some rare intellectual gift. It was the years of forced stillness that had trained him to see what other people never bothered to look for, the true self, leaking out from beneath the performed one. Greene uses Erickson's story to make a larger point about all of us. Most people go through life reading only the surface, the words, the stated opinions, the social smile. They take the role at face value because doing otherwise takes effort. And because, in truth, most people are too consumed with managing their own performance to study anyone else's. But the moment you begin to watch, really watch, the same signals that Erickson spent years learning to decode become visible to you as well. There is a particular kind of tension to look for. The gap between what someone says and what their body is doing while they say it. A person praising a colleague's work while their arms cross defensively over their chest. A person insisting they are totally fine while their voice climbs an octave and their hands will not stay still. This incongruence, word contradicting, gesture is one of the most reliable signs that you are looking at a performance rather than the truth beneath it. Timing tells its own story. Genuine reactions tend to happen instantly. Performed reactions often arrive a half-second late, as the brain calculates the socially correct response before delivering it. Watch for the pause before the smile, the beat of hesitation before the enthusiastic yes. That gap is where the real person briefly shows themselves before the mask closes back over. Tone of voice carries information that words are trained to hide. Anxiety tightens the throat and raises pitch. Genuine warmth softens and slows the voice. Performed warmth often sounds slightly too bright, too consistent, missing the natural variation of real feeling. Once you start listening for this, you will hear it everywhere. In the overly cheerful greeting of someone who resents you. In the carefully even tone of someone suppressing anger. But Greene's law of role-playing is not only a lesson in reading others. It is also, uncomfortably, a lesson in accepting something about ourselves. We, too, are always performing. We, too, wear a professional mask at work, a filial mask with our parents, a romantic mask with a partner, each one calibrated to the audience in front of us. Greene does not condemn this. He argues that role-playing is not dishonesty. It is the basic mechanism that allows large groups of humans to live and cooperate together without descending into constant emotional chaos. The mistake is not in wearing the mask. The mistake is in forgetting that you are wearing one and mistaking your performed self for your entire self. The people who master this law, Greene argues, gain two forms of power at once. The first is the power to see clearly, to read the true feelings of employees, partners, friends, and rivals behind their carefully managed surfaces, and to respond to reality instead of illusion. The second is the power of self-command, to choose, consciously, which version of yourself to present in a given moment, rather than being dragged around by whatever mask habit has assigned you. A skilled negotiator does not simply hide their impatience. They choose deliberately to project calm, because they understand that the role they perform shapes how others respond to them. History offers a second lesson in this law, from the opposite direction, not someone who learned to read the mask, but someone who learned to wear one with extraordinary skill. When Elizabeth Tudor became Queen of England in 1558, she inherited a throne surrounded by danger. Her own legitimacy was disputed. Powerful nobles doubted that a young, unmarried woman could hold the country together. Foreign kings circled, expecting her to fail. Elizabeth understood, perhaps better than any ruler of her age, that survival depended not on what she actually felt in any given moment, but on the role she projected to everyone watching her. In council meetings, when advisors argued fiercely over war and marriage and religion, witnesses recorded that Elizabeth rarely showed her true position. She would sit, composed, offering ambiguous answers, allowing factions to reveal their hands while she revealed almost nothing of her own. Privately, in letters and in the accounts of those closest to her, we know she experienced fear, fury, grief, indecision like anyone else. Publicly, she performed an image of calm, almost mystical authority, the Virgin Queen, married only to her country, untouched by ordinary human need. It was, in the fullest sense, a role consciously constructed and relentlessly maintained for over 4 decades. This was not dishonesty in the way we usually judge it. It was survival. A queen who let her subjects see every private doubt would have been devoured by the same nobles who were, at that very moment, testing her for weakness. Elizabeth's mastery of the law of role-playing did not mean she had no true self. It meant she understood precisely when to reveal it, to whom and when instead, to offer the country the steady performance it needed in order to feel safe. Between Erickson and Elizabeth, Greene shows us both halves of this law. Erickson represents the power of seeing through the roles that others perform. Elizabeth represents the power of consciously shaping the role you perform yourself. Mastery, in Greene's framework, means learning to do both. Reading the true, feelings hidden beneath other people's masks, while remaining fully aware of and in command of your own. There is a discipline in this, almost a martial art of the self. It begins with the same practice that saved Milton Erickson: stillness and attention. Instead of rushing to fill silence with your own words, watch. Notice the half-second delays, the smiles that do not reach the eyes, the shoulders that tense at a supposedly casual question. Practice on strangers in cafes, on colleagues in meetings, on your own reflection when you rehearse a difficult conversation. Over time, what feels like effortful observation becomes, as it did for Erickson, an almost automatic second sense. This is the deeper promise of the law of role-playing. It is not merely a party trick for reading body language. It is a shift in how you relate to other people altogether, from taking their performance at face value to understanding that every human being you meet is carrying an entire hidden self behind the one they present to you. Approach people this way, and negotiations change, relationships deepen, and the manipulations of others lose much of their power over you, because you have learned to watch the actor, not just listen to the script. Robert Greene closes this law with a challenge that carries forward into everything else in his study of human nature. Stop being fooled by the surface. Learn to see the performance for what it is, in others and in yourself, and you gain something close to a superpower in a world built almost entirely out of masks. Think back to the boy on the farm in Wisconsin, paralyzed and silent, learning to read an entire hidden language in the twitch of a hand, or the pause before a sentence. He turned stillness into insight, and insight into one of the most extraordinary careers in the history of psychology. You do not need polio to develop that same eye. You only need to slow down. Watch closely and remember, every time someone speaks to you, that the words are only ever half the message. The rest is written in the space between what is said and what is felt. And that space, once you learn to read it, changes everything about how you move through the world.